Chapter 13 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 13. Costra Bellowen. How the Lord Jus accomplished at length his dream's behest, to inquire in Costra Bellowen, and what manner of answer he received. That night they spent safely, by favour of the gods, under the highest crags of Costra Pivracha, in a sheltered hollow piled round with snow. Dawn came like a lily, saffron-hued, smirched with smoke-grey streaks that slanted from the north. The great peaks stood as islands above a main of level cloud, out of which the sun walked flaming, a ball of red-gold fire. An hour before his face appeared, the demons and Mivarsh were roped and started on their eastward journey. Ill to do with as was the crest of the great north buttress by which they had climbed the mountain, 7 times worse was this eastern ridge, leading to Costra Bellowen. Leaner of back it was, flanked by more profound abysses, deeplier gashed, too treacherous and too sudden in its changes from sure rock to rotten and perilous, piled with tottering crags, hung about with cornices of uncertain snow, girt with cliffs smooth and holdless as a castle wall. Small marvel that it cost them 13 hours to come down that ridge. The sun wheeled towards the west, when they reached at length that frozen edge, sharp as a sickle, that was in the gates of Zimiambia. Weary they were, and ropeless, for by no means else might they come down from the last great tower, save by the rope made fast from above. A fierce northeaster had swept the ridges all day, bringing snowstorms on its wings. Their fingers were numbed with cold, and the beards of Lord Brandagdahar and Mivarsh Faz stiff with ice. Too weary to halt, they set forth again, just leading. It was many hundred paces along that ice edge, and the sun was near setting, when they stood at last within a stone's throw of the cliffs of Costra Bellowen. Since before noon avalanches had thundered ceaselessly down those cliffs. Now in the cool of the evening all was still. The wind was fallen, the deep blue sky was without a cloud. The fires of sunset crept down the vast white precipices before them, till every ledge and fold and frozen pinnacle glowed pink colour, and every shadow became an emerald. The shadow of Costra Pivracha lay cold across the lower stretches of the face on the Zimiamvian side. The edge of that shadow was as the division betwixt the living and the dead. "What dost thou think on?" said Jus to Brandagdahar, that leaned upon his sword surveying that glory. Brandagdahar started and looked on him. "Why," said he, "on this, that it is likely thy dream was but a lure, sent thee by the king to tempt us on to mighty actions reserved for our destruction. On this side at least 'tis very certain there lieth no way up Costra Bellowen." "What of the little martlet," said Jus, "who, whiles we were yet a great way off, flew out of the south to greet us with a gracious message?" "Well, if it were not a devil of his," said Brandagdahar. "I will not turn back," said Jus. "Thou needest not to come with me." And he turned again to look on those frozen cliffs. "No," said Brandagdahar, "nor thou with me. Thou'lt make me angry if thou wilt so vilely wrest my words. Only fare not too securely, and let that axe still be ready in thine hand, as is my sword, for kindlier work than step-cutting. And if thou embrace the hope to climb her by this wall before us, then hath the king's enchantery made thee fey." By then was the sun gone down. Under the wings of night uplifted from the east, the unfathomable heights of air turned a richer blue, and here and there, most dim and hard to see, throbbed a tiny point of light, the greater stars opening their eyelids to the gathering dark. Gloom crept upward, brimming the valleys far below like a rising tide of the sea. Frost and stillness waited on the eternal night to resume her reign. The solemn cliffs of Costra Bellowen stood in tremendous silence, death pale against the sky. Jus came backward a step along the ridge, and laying his hand on Brandagdahar's, "Be still," he said, "and behold this marvel." A little up the face of the mountain on the Zimiamvian side, it was as if some leavings of the afterglow had been entangled among the crags and frozen curtains of snow. As the gloom deepened, that glow brightened and spread, filling a rift that seemed to go into the mountain. "It is because of us," said Jus in a low voice. "She is afire with expectation of us." No sound was there, save of their breath coming and going, and of the strokes of Jus's axe, and of the chips of ice chinking downwards into silence as he cut their way along the ridge. And ever brighter, as night fell, burned that strange sunset light above them. Perilous climbing it was for 50 feet or more from the ridge, for they had no rope, The way was hard to see, and the rocks were steep and iced, and every ledge deep in snow. Yet they came safe at length, up by a steep short gully to the gully's head, where it widened to that rift of the wondrous light. Here might two walk abreast, and Lord Juss and Lord Brandok took their weapons and entered abreast into the rift. Mivarsh was fain to call to them, but he was speechless. He came after, close at their heels like a dog. For some way the bed of the cave ran upwards, then dipped at a gentle slope deep into the mountain. The air was cold, yet warm after the frozen air without. The rose-red light shone warm on the walls and floor of that passage, but none might say whence it shone. Strange sculptures glimmered overhead, bull-headed men, stags with human faces, mammoths and behemoths of the flood, vast forms and uncertain, carved in the living rock. For hours Juss and his companions pursued their way, winding downward, losing all sense of north and south. Little by little the light faded, and after an hour or two they went in darkness, yet not in utter darkness, but as of a starless night in summer, where all night long twilight lingers. They went a soft pace, for fear of pitfalls in the way. After a while Juss halted and sniffed the air. "I smell new-mown hay," he said, "and flower scents. Is this my fantasy, or canst thou smell them too?" "Ay, and have smelt it this half-hour past," answered Brandok. "Also the passage wideneth before us, and the roof of it goeth higher as we journey." "This," said Juss, "is a great wonder." They fared onward, and in a while the slope slackened, and they felt loose stones and grit beneath their feet, and in a while soft earth. They bent down and touched the earth, and there was grass growing, and night dew on the grass, and daisies folded up asleep. A brook tinkled on the right. So they crossed that meadow in the dark, until they stood below a shadowy mass that bulked big above them. In a blind wall so high the top was swallowed up in the darkness, a gate stood open. They crossed that threshold, and passed through a paved court that clanked under their tread. Before them a flight of steps went up to folding doors under an archway. Lord Brandok felt Mivarsh pluck him by the sleeve. The little man's teeth were chattering together in his head for terror. Brandok smiled and put an arm about him. Juss had his foot on the lowest step. In that instant came a sound of music playing, but of what instruments they might not guess. Great thundering chords began it, like trumpets calling to battle, first high, then low, then shuddering down to silence. Then that great call again, sounding defiance. Then the keys took new voices, groping in darkness, rising to passionate lament, hovering and dying away on the wind, until naught remained but a roll as of muffled thunder, long, low, quiet, but menacing ill. And now out of the darkness of that induction burst a mighty form, 3 ponderous blows, as of breakers that plunge and strike on a desolate shore. A pause, those blows again, a grinding pause, a rushing of wings as of furies steaming up from the pit, another flight of them dreadful in its deliberation, then a wild rush upward and a swooping again, confusion of hell, raging serpents blazing through night sky. Then on a sudden out of a distant key, a sweet melody, long drawn and clear, like a blaze of low sunshine piercing the dust clouds above a battlefield. This was but an interlude to the terror of the great main theme that came in tumultuous strides up again from the deeps, storming to a grand climacteric of fury, and passing away into silence. Now came a majestic figure, stately and calm, born of that terror, leading to it again. Battlings of these themes in many keys, and at last the great triple blow, thundering in new strength, crushing old joy and sweetness as with a mace of iron, battering the roots of life into a general ruin. But even in the main stride of its outrage and terror, that great power seemed to shrivel. The thunder blasts crashed weaklier, the harsh blows rattled awry, and the vast frame of conquest and destroying violence sank down panting, tottered, and rumbled ingloriously into silence. Like men held in a trance, those lords of Demonland listened to the last echoes of the great sad chord where that music had breathed out its heart, as if the very heart of wrath were broken. But this was not the end. Cold and serene as some chaste virgin vowed to the gods, with clear eyes which see naught below high heaven, a quiet melody rose from that grave of terror. Weak it seemed at first, a little thing after that cataclysm, a little thing like spring's first bud peeping after the blasting rain of cold and ice. Yet it walked undismayed, gathering as it went beauty and power. and on a sudden the folding doors swung open, shedding a flood of radiance down the stairs. Lord Juss and Lord Brandok Nahar watched, as men watch for a star to rise, that radiant portal. And like a star indeed, or like the tranquil moon appearing, they beheld after a while one crowned like a queen, with a diadem of little clouds that seemed stolen from the mountain sunset, scattering soft beams of rosy brightness. She stood alone under that mighty portico, with its vast shadowy forms of winged lions in shining stone black as jet. Youthful she seemed, as one that hath but just bidden adieu to childhood, with grave sweet lips and grave black eyes and hair like the night. Little black martlets perched on her either shoulder, and a dozen more skimmed the air above her head, so swift of wing that scarcely the eye might follow them. Meantime, that delicate and simple melody mounted from height to height, until in a while it burned with all the fires of summer, burned as summer to the uttermost ember, fierce and compulsive in its riot of love and beauty. So that, before the last triumphant chords died down in silence, that music had brought back to Juss all the glories of the mountains, the sunset fires on Costra Bellorn, the first great revelation of the peaks from Morna Maruna. And over all these, as the spirit of that music to the eye made manifest, the image of that queen so blessed fair in her youth, and her clear brow's sweet solemn respect and promise, in every line and pose of her fair form, virginal dainty as a flower, and kindled from withinward as never flower was, with that divinity before the face of which speech and song fall silent, and men may but catch their breath and worship. When she spoke it was with a voice like crystal. Thanks be and praise to the blessed gods, for lo, the years depart, and the fated years bring forth as the gods ordain, and ye be those that were for to come. Surely those great lords of Demonland stood like little boys before her. She said again, Are not ye Lord Juss and Lord Brandok Nahar of Demonland, come up to me by the way banned to all mortals else, come up into Costra Bellorn? Then answered Lord Juss for them both, and said, Surely, O Queen Sophonisba, we be they thou namest. Now the queen carried them into her palace, and into a great hall where was her throne and state. The pillars of the hall were as vast towers, and there were galleries above them, tier upon tier, rising higher than sight could reach, or the light of the gentle lamps in their stands that lighted the tables and the floor. The walls and the pillars were of a sombre stone and polished, and on the walls strange portraitures, lions, dragons, knickers of the sea, spread eagles, elephants, swans, unicorns, and other, lively made and richly set forth with curious colours of painting, all of giant size beyond the experience of humankind, so that to be in that hall was as it were to shelter in a small spot of light and life, canopied, vaulted, and embraced by the circumambient unknown. The queen sat on her throne, that was bright like the face of a river ruffled with wind under a silver moon. Save for those little martlets she was unattended. She made those lords of Demonland sit down before her face, and there were brought forth by the agency of unseen hands tables before them, and precious dishes filled with unknown viands. And there played a soft music, made in the air by what unseen art they knew not. The queen said, Behold ambrosia, which the gods do eat, and nectar which they drink, on which meat and wine myself do feed, by the bounty of the blessed gods. And the savour thereof wearieth not, and the glow thereof and the perfume thereof dieth not for ever. So they tasted of the ambrosia, that was white to look on, and crisp to the tooth, and sweet, and being eaten, revived strength in the body more than a surfeit of bullock's flesh, and of the nectar that was all a foam, and coloured like the inmost fires of sunset. Surely somewhat of the peace of the gods was in that nectar divine. The queen said, Tell me, why are ye come? Juss answered, Surely there was a dream sent me, O Queen Sophonisba, through the gate of Horn, and it bade me enquire hither after him I most desire, for want of whom my whole soul languisheth in sorrow this year gone by, even after my dear brother, the Lord Goldry Blusko. His words ceased in his throat, for with the speaking of that name the firm fabric of the palace quivered like the leaves of a forest under a sudden squall. Colour went from the scene, like the blood chased from a man's face by fear, and all was of a pallid hue, like the landscape which one beholds of a bright summer day, after lying with eyes closed for a space face upward under the blazing sun. All grey and cold, the warm colours burnt to ashes. Withal followed the appearance of hateful little creatures issuing from the joints of the paving stones and the great blocks of the walls and pillars, some like grasshoppers with human heads and wings of flies, some like fishes with stings in their tails, some fat like toads, some like eels a-wriggling with puppy dogs' heads and asses' ears, loathly ones, exiles of glory, scaly and obscene. The horror passed. Colour returned. The Queen sat like a graven statue, her lips parted. After a while she said, with a shaken voice, low and with downcast eyes, "Sir, you demand of me a very strange matter, such as wherewith never hitherto I have been acquainted. As you are noble, I beseech you speak not that name again. In the name of the blessed gods, speak it not again." Lord Just was silent. Naught good were his thoughts within him. In due time a little martlet by the Queen's command brought them to their bedchambers, and there in great beds soft and fragrant they went to rest. Just waked long in the doubtful light, troubled at heart. At length he fell into a troubled sleep. The glimmer of the lamps mingled with his dreams, and his dreams with it, so that scarce he wist whether asleep or waking he beheld the walls of the bedchamber dispart in sunder, disclosing a prospect of vast paths of moonlight, and a solitary mountain peak standing naked out of a sea of cloud that gleamed white beneath the moon. It seemed to him that the power of flight was upon him, and that he flew to that mountain, and hung in air beholding it near at hand, and a circle as the appearance of fire round about it, and on the summit of the mountain the likeness of a burg or citadel of brass, that was green with eld, and surface battered by the frosts and winds of ages. On the battlements was the appearance of a great company, both men and women, never still, now walking on the wall with hands lifted up as in supplication to the crystal lamps of heaven, now flinging themselves on their knees, or leaning against the brazen battlements to bury their faces in their hands, or standing at gaze as night-walkers gazing into the void. Some seemed men of war, and some great courtiers by their costly apparel, rulers and kings' daughters, grave bearded counsellors, youths and maidens and crowned queens. And when they went, and when they stood, and when they seemed to cry aloud bitterly, all was noiseless even as the tomb, and the faces of those mourners pallid as a dead corpse is pallid. Then it seemed to Just that he beheld a keep of brass, flat-roofed, standing on the right, a little higher than the wall, with battlements about the roof. He strove to cry aloud, but it was as if some devil gripped his throat, stifling him, for no sound came. For in the midst of the roof, as it were on a bench of stone, was the appearance of one reclining, his chin resting in his great right hand, his elbow on an arm of the bench, his cloak about him gorgeous with cloth of gold, his ponderous two-handed sword beside him with its heart-shaped ruby pommel darkly resplendent in the moonlight. Naught otherwise looked he than when Just last beheld him, on their ship before the darkness swallowed them. Only the ruddy hues of life seemed departed from him, and his brow seemed clouded with sorrow. His eye met his brother's, but with no look of recognition, gazing as if on some far point in the deeps beyond the starshine. It seemed to Just that even so would he have looked to find his brother Goldry, as he now found him, his head unbent for all the tyranny of those dark powers that held him in captivity, keeping like a god his patient vigil, heedless alike of the laments of them that shared his prison, and of the menace of the houseless night about him. The vision passed, and Lord Just perceived himself in his bed again, the cold morning light stealing between the hangings of the windows, and dimming the soft radiance of the lamps. Now for 7 days they dwelt in that palace. No living thing they encountered, save only the Queen and her little martlets, but all things desirous were ministered unto them by unseen hands, and all royal entertainment. Yet was Lord Just heavy at heart, for as often as he would question the Queen of Goldry, so she would ever put him by, praying him earnestly not a second time to pronounce that name of terror. At last, walking with her alone in the cool of the evening, on a trodden path of a meadow where asphodel grew, and other holy flowers beside a quiet stream, he said, "So it is, O Queen Sophonisba, that when I first came hither and spake with thee, I well thought that by thee my matter should be well sped, and didst not thou then promise me thy goodness, and grace from thee thereafter?" "This is very true," said the Queen. "Then why," said he, "when I would question thee of that I make most store of, wilt thou always daff me and put me by?" She was silent, hanging her head. He looked sidelong for a minute at her sweet profile, the grave clear lines of her mouth and chin. "Of whom must I inquire," he said, "if not of thee, which art queen in Costa Bellorn, and must know this thing?" She stopped and faced him with dark eyes that were like a child's for innocence, and like a god's for splendour. "My lord, that I have put thee off, Ascribe it not to evil intent. That were an unnatural part indeed in me unto you of Demonland, who have fulfilled the weird and set me free again, to visit again the world of men, which I so much desire, despite all my sorrows I there fulfilled in elder time. Or shall I forget you are at enmity with the wicked house of Witchland, and therefore doubly pledged my friends? That the event must prove, O Queen, said Lord Just. O saw ye Morna Maruna? Cried she. Saw ye it in the wilderness? And when he looked on her still dark and mistrustful, she said, Is this forgot? And methought it should be mention and remembrance made thereof unto the end of the world. I pray thee, my lord, what age art thou? I have looked upon this world, answered Lord Just, for thrice 10 years. And I, said the Queen, but 17 summers. Yet that same age had I when thou wast born, and thy grandsire before thee, and his before him. For the gods gave me youth for evermore, when they brought me hither after the realm rape that befell our house, and lodged me in this mountain. She paused and stood motionless, her hands clasped lightly before her, her head bent, her face turned a little away, so that he saw only the white curve of her neck and her cheek's soft outline. All the air was full of sunset, though no sun was there, but a scattered splendour only, shed from the high roof of rock that was like a sky above them, self-effulgent. Very softly she began again to speak, the crystal accents of her voice sounding like the faint notes of a bell, borne from a great way off, on the quiet air of a summer evening. Surely time past is gone by like a shadow since those days, when I was queen in Morna Maruna, dwelling there with my lady mother, and the princes my cousins in peace and joy, until Garais the Third came out of the north, the great king of Witchland, desiring to explore these mountains, for his pride's sake and his insolent heart, which cost him dear. 'Twas on an evening of early summer we beheld him and his folk ride over the flowering meadows of the Maruna. Nobly was he entertained by us, and when we knew what way he meant to go, we counselled him turn back, and the manticores must tear him if he went. But he mocked at our advisos, and on the morrow departed, he and his, by way of Umpren Edge, and never again were they seen of living man. That had been small loss. But hereof there befell a great and horrible mischief. For in the spring of the year came Garais the Fourth, with a great army out of waterish Witchland, saying with open mouth of defamation that we were the dead king's murderers, we that were peaceful folk, and would not entertain an action should call us villain for all the wealth of Impland. In the night they came, when all we save the sentinels upon the walls were in our beds secure, in a quiet conscience. They took the princes my cousins and all our men, and before our eyes most cruelly murdered them. So that my mother seeing these things fell suddenly into deadly swoonings, and was presently dead. And the king commanded them burn the house with fire, and he brake down the holy altars of the gods, and defiled their high places. And unto me that was young and fair to look on he gave this choice, to go with him and be his slave, other else to be cast down from the edge, and all my bones be broken. Surely I chose this rather. But the gods that do help every rightful true cause made light my fall, and guided me hither safe through all perils of height and cold and ravening beasts, granting me youth and peaceful days for ever, here on the borderland between the living and the dead. And the gods blew upon all the land of the Maruna in the fire of their wrath, to make it desolate, and man and beast cut off therefrom, for a witness of the wicked deeds of Garais the king, even as Garais the king made desolate our little castle and our pleasant places. The face of the land was lifted up to high airs, where frosts do dwell, so that the cliffs of Umpren Edge, down which ye came, are 10 times the height they were when Garais the Third came down them. So was an end of flowers on the Maruna, and an end there of spring and of summer days for ever. The Queen ceased speaking, and Lord Just was silent for a space, greatly marvelling. Judge now, said she, if your foes be not my foes. It is not hidden from me, my lord, that you deem me but a lukewarm friend and no helper at all in your enterprise. Yet have I ceased not since you were here to search and to inquire, and sent my little martlets west and east and south and north after tidings of him thou namest. They are swift, even as wingy thoughts circling the stablished world, and they return to me on weary wings, yet with never a word of thy great kinsman. Just looked at her eyes that were moist with tears. Truth sat in them like an angel. O Queen, he cried, why need thy little minions scour the world, when my brother is here in Costrabellorn? She shook her head, saying, This I will swear to thee, there hath no mortal come up into Costrabellorn, save only thee and thy companions these 200 years. But Just said again, My brother is here in Costra Bellorn. Mine eyes beheld him that first night, hedged about with fires, and he is held captive on a tower of brass on a peak of a mountain. There be no mountains here, said she, save this in whose womb we have our dwelling. Yet so I beheld my brother, said Juss, under the white beams of the full moon. There is no moon here, said the queen. So Lord Juss rehearsed to her his vision of the night, telling her point to point of everything. She hearkened gravely, and when he had done, trembled a little and said, This is a mystery, my lord, beyond my resolution. She fell silent a while. Then she began to say in a hushed voice, as if the very words and breath might breathe some dreadful matter, Taken up in ascending maleficial by King Garais the 12th, so it hath ever been, that whensoever there dieth one of the house of Garais, there riseth up another in his stead, and so from strength to strength, and death weakeneth not this house of Witchland, but like the dandelion weed being cut down and bruised, it springeth up the stronger. Dost thou know why? He answered, No. The blessed gods, said she, speaking yet lower, have shown me many hidden matters, which the sons of men know not neither imagine. Behold this mystery. There is but one Garais, and by the favour of heaven, that moveth sometimes in a manner our weak judgment seeketh in vain to justify, this cruel and evil one, every time, whether by the sword or in the fullness of his years he cometh to die, departeth the living soul and spirit of him into a new and sound body, and liveth yet another lifetime to vex and to oppress the world, until that body die, and the next in his turn, and so continually, having thus in a manner life eternal. Just said, Thy discourse, O Queen Sophonisba, is in a strain above mortality. This is a great wonder thou tellest me, whereof some little part I guessed aforetime, but the main I knew not. Rightfully, having such a timeless life, this king weareth on his thumb that Worm Ouroboros, which doctors have from of old made for an ensample of eternity, whereof the end is ever at the beginning, and the beginning at the end for evermore. See then the hardness of the thing, said the queen. But I forget not, my lord, that thou hast a matter nearer thine heart than this, to set free him, name him not, concerning whom thou didst inquire of me. Touching this, know it for thy comfort, some ray of light I see. Question me no more till I have made trial thereof, lest it prove but a false dawn. If it be as I think, 'tis a trial yet abideth thee, should make the stoutest blench. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 14. The Lake of Ravare. Of the furtherance given by Queen Sophonisba, fosterling of the gods, to Lord Juss and Lord Brandok de Ha, with how the hippogriff's egg was hatched beside the enchanted lake, and what ensued therefrom. Next day the Queen came to Lord Juss and Lord Brandok de Ha, and made them go with her, and Mivarch with them to serve them, over the meadows and down a passage like that whereby they had entered the mountain, but this led downward. Ye may marvel, she said, to see daylight in the heart of this great mountain. Yet it is but the hidden work of nature. For the rays of the sun, striking all day upon Costra Bellorn, and upon her robe of snow, sink into the snow like water, and so, soaking through the secret places of the rocks, shine again in this hollow chamber where we dwell, and in these passages cleft by the gods, to give us our goings out and our comings in. And as sunset followeth broad day with coloured fires, and moonlight or darkness followeth sunset, and dawn followeth night, ushering the bright day once more, so these changes of the dark and light succeed one another within the mountain. They passed on, ever downward, till, after many hours, they came suddenly forth into dazzling sunlight. They stood at a cave's mouth, on a beach of sand white and clean, that was lapped by the ripples of a sapphire lake, a great lake, sown with islets craggy, and luxuriant with trees and flowering growths. Many-armed was the lake, winding everywhere in secret reaches behind promontories that were spurs of the mountains that held it in their bosom, some wooded or green with lush flower-spangled turf to the water's edge, some with bare rocks abrupt from the water, some crowned with rugged lines of crag that sent down scree slopes into the lake below. It was mid-afternoon, sweet-aired, a day of dappled cloud shadows and changing lights. White birds circled above the lake, and now and then a kingfisher flashed by like a streak of azure flame. That was a westward-facing beach, at the end of a headland that ran down clothed with pine forests, with open primrose glades, from a spur of Costra Bellone. Northward the two great mountains stood at the head of a straight narrow valley that ran up to the gates of Ximianvia. Vaster they seemed than the demons had yet beheld them, showing at but 6 or 7 miles distance a clear 16,000 feet above the lake. Nor from any other point of prospect were they more lovely to behold. Costra Pivrocha like an eagle armed, shadowing with wings, and Costra Bellone as a goddess fallen a-dreaming, gracious as the morning star of heaven. Wondrous bright were their snows in the sunshine, yet ghostly and unsubstantial to view seen through the hazy summer air. Olive trees, grey and soft outlined like embodied mist, grew in the lower valleys. Woods of oak and birch, and every forest tree clothed the slopes, and in the warmer folds of the mountain-sides, belts of creamy rhododendrons straggled upwards even to the moraines above the lower glaciers and the very margin of the snows. The Queen watched Lord Juss as his gaze moved to the left past Costra Pivrocha, past the blunt lower crest of Goglio, to a great lonely peak many miles distant, that frowned over the rich maze of nearer ridges which stood above the lake. Its southern shoulder swept in a long majestic line of cliffs up to a clean sharp summit. Northward it fell steeply away. Little snow hung on the sheer rock faces, save where the gullies cleft them. For grace and beauty, scarce might Costra Bellone herself surpass that peak. But terrible it looked, and as a mansion of old night, that not high noonday could wholly dispossess of darkness. "There standeth a mountain great and fair," said Lord Brandok-Dahar, "which was hid in a cloud when we were on the high ridges. It hath the look of a great beast couchant." Still the Queen watched Lord Juss, who looked still on that peak. Then he turned to her, his hands clenched on the buckles of his breastplates. She said, "Was it as I think?" He took a great breath. "It was so I beheld it in the beginning," he said, "as from this place. But here are we too far off to see the citadel of brass, or know if it be truly there." And he said to Brandok-Dahar, "This remaineth, that we climb that mountain." "That can ye never do," said the Queen. "That shall be shown," said Brandok-Dahar. "List," said she, "nameless is yonder mountain upon earth, for until this hour, save only for me and you, the eye of living man hath not looked upon it. But unto the gods it hath a name, and unto the spirits of the blessed that do inhabit this land, and unto those unhappy souls that are held in captivity on that cold mountain-top. Zorarach nam Psarion, standing apart above the noiseless, lifeless snowfields that feed the Psarion glaciers. Loneliest and secretest of all earth's mountains, and most accursed. O my lords," she said, "think not to climb up Zora. Enchantments ring round Zora, so that ye should not get so near as to the edges of the snowfields at her feet, ere ruin gathered you." Just smiled. "O Queen Sophonisba, little thou knowest our mind, if thou think this shall turn us back." "I say it," said the Queen, "with no such vain purpose, but to show you the necessity of that way I shall now tell you of, since well I know ye will not give over this attempt. To none save to a demon durst I have told it, lest heaven should hold me answerable for his death. But unto you I may, with the less danger, commit this dangerous counsel, if it be true, as I was taught long ago, that the hippogriff was seen of old in Demonland." "The hippogriff?" said Lord Brandok-Dahar. "What else is it than the emblem of our greatness? 1,000 years ago they nested on Neverdale halls, and there abide unto this day in the rocks the prints of their hooves and talons. He that rode it was a forefather of mine, and of Lord Juss." "He that shall ride it again," said Queen Sophonisba, "he only of mortal men may win to Zorarach, and if he be man enough of his hands, may deliver him we wot of out of bondage." "O Queen," said Juss, "somewhat I know of gramarye and divine philosophy, yet must I bow to thee for such learning, that dwellest here from generation to generation, and dost commune with the dead. How shall we find this steed? Few they be, and high they fly above the world, and come to birth but one in 300 years. She answered, "I have an egg. In all lands else must such an egg lie barren and sterile, save in this land of Ximianvia, which is sacred to the lordly races of the dead. And thus cometh this steed to the birth, when one of might and heart beyond the want of man sleepeth in this land with the egg in his bosom, greatly desiring some high achievement. The fire of his great longing hatcheth the egg, and the hippogriff cometh out therefrom, weak-winged at first as thou hast seen a butterfly new hatched out his chrysalis. Then only mayst thou mount him, and if thou be man enow to turn him to thy will, he shall bear thee to the uttermost parts of earth unto thine heart's desire. But if there be aught less than greatest, beware that steed, and mount only earthly courses. For if there be aught of dross within thee, and thine heart falter, or thy purpose cool, or thou forget the level aim of thy glory, then will he toss thee to thy ruin. Thou hast this thing, O Queen? Said Lord Juss. My lord, she said softly, more than 100 years ago I found it, while I rambled on the cliffs that are about this charmed lake of Ravari. And here I hid it, being taught by the gods what thing I had found, and knowing what was foreordained, that certain of earth should come at last to Costra Belorn, thinking in my heart that he that should come might be of those who bear some great unfulfilled desire, and might be of such might as could ride to his desire on such a steed. They abode, talking little, by the charmed lake's shore till evening. Then they arose and went with her to a pavilion by the lake, built in a grove of flowering trees. Ere they went to rest, she brought them the hippogriff's egg, great as a man's body, yet light of weight, rough and coloured like gold. And she said, Which of you, my lords? Juss answered, He, if might and a high heart should only count, but I, because my brother it is that we must free from his dismal place. So the Queen gave the egg to Lord Juss, and he, bearing it in his arms, bade her good night, saying, I need no other laudanum than this to make me sleep. And the ambrosial night came down, and gentle sleep, softer than sleep is on earth, closed their eyes in that pavilion beside the enchanted lake. Mivarsh slept not. Small joy had he of that lake of Ravari, caring for none of its beauties, but mindful still of certain lewd bulks he had seen basking by its shores all through the golden afternoon. He had questioned one of the Queen's martlets concerning them, who laughed at him and let him know that these were crocodiles, wardens of the lake, tame and gentle toward the heroes of bliss who resorted thither to bathe and disport themselves. But should such an one as thou, she said, adventure there, they would chop thee up at a mouthful. This saddened him, and indeed little ease of heart had he since he came out of Impland, and dearly he desired his home, though it were sacked and burnt, and the men of his own blood, though they should prove his foes. And well he thought that if Juss should fly with Brandok Dahar, mounted on hippogriff, to that cold mountain top, where souls of the great were held in bondage, he should never win back alone to the world of men, past the frozen mountains and the manticores, and past the crocodile that dwelt beside Barvinan. He lay awake an hour or twain, weeping quietly, until out of the giant heart of midnight came to him with fiery clearness the words of the Queen, saying that by the heat of great longing in his heart that claspeth it must that egg be hatched, and that man should then mount and ride on the wind unto his heart's desire. Therewith Mivarsh sat up, his hands clammy with mixed fear and longing. It seemed to him, awake and alone among the sleepers in that breathless night, that no longing could be greater than his longing. He said in his heart, I will arise, and take the egg privily from the devil transmarine, and clasp it myself. I do him no wrong thereby, for said she not it was perilous? Also every man raketh the embers to his own cake. So he arose, and came secretly to Juss, where he lay with his strong arms circling the egg. A beam of the moon came in by a window, shining on the face of Juss, that was as the face of a god. Mivarsh bent over him, and teased the egg gently from his embrace, praying fervently the while. And, for Juss was in a profound slumber, his soul mounting in vision far from earth, far from that shore divine, to lone regions where Goldry watched still in frozen mournful patience on the heights of Zora, at last Mivarsh gat the egg, and bare it to his bed. Very warm it was, crackling to his ear as he embraced it, as of a power moving from withinwards. In such wise Mivarsh fell asleep, clasping the egg as a man should clasp his dearest. And a little before dawn it hatched in his arms, and fell asunder, and he started awake, his arms about the neck of a strange steed. It went forth into the pale light before the sunrise, and he with it, holding it fast. The sheen of its hair was like the peacock's neck, its eyes like the changing fires of a star of a windy night. Its nostrils widened to the breath of the dawn. Its wings unfolded and grew stiff, their feathers like the tail feathers of the peacock pheasant, white with purple eyes, and hard to the touch as iron blades. Mivarsh was mounted on its back, seizing the shining mane with both hands, trembling. And now was he fain to descend, but the hippogriff snorted and reared, and he, fearing a great fall, clung closer. It stamped with its silver hoofs, flapping its wings, ramping like a lioness, tearing up the grass with its claws. Mivosh screamed, torn between hope and fear. It plunged forward and leaped into the air and flew. The demons, waked by the whirring of wings, rushed from the pavilion, to behold that marvel flown against the obscure west. Wild was its flight, like a snipe dipping and plunging, and while they looked, they saw the rider flung from his seat, and heard, some moments after, a dull flop and splash of a body fallen in the lake. The wild steed vanished, winging toward the upper air. Rings ran outward from the splash, troubling the surface of the lake, marring the dark reflection of Zorarach mirrored in the sleeping waters. "Poor Mivosh!" cried Lord Brandok-Dahar. "After all the weary leagues I made him go with me." And he threw off his cloak, took a dagger in his teeth, and swam with great over-arm strokes out to the spot where Mivosh fell. But naught he found of Mivosh. Only he saw nearby, on an island beach, a crocodile, big and bloated, that eyed him guiltily, and stayed not for his coming, but lumbering into the water dived and disappeared. So Brandok-Dahar turned and swam ashore again. Lord Just stood as a man stricken to stone. As one despaired, he turned to the Queen, who now came forth to them wrapped in a mantle of swan's down. Yet high he held his head. "O Queen Sophonisba, here is that secret gloam or bottom of our days, come when we sniff the sweetness of the morning." "My lord," said she, "the flies Hemery take life with the sun and die with the dew. But thou, if thou be truly great, join not hands with desperation. Let the sad ending of this poor servant of thine be to thee a monument against such folly. Earth is not ruined for a single shower. Come back with me to Costrabelloin." He looked at the grand peak of Zora, dark against the wakening east. "Madam," he said, "thou hast little more than half my years, and yet by another computation thou art 7 times mine age. I am not light of will, nor thou shalt not find me a fool to thee. Let us go back to Costrabelloin." They brake their fast quietly, and returned by the way they came. And the Queen said, "My lords Jus and Brandok-Dahar, there be few steeds of such a kind to carry you to Zorarach Nampsarion, and not ye, though ye be beyond the half-gods in your might and virtue, might have power to ride them, but if ye take them from the egg. So high they fly, so shy they are, ye should not catch them though ye waited 10 men's lifetimes. I will send my martlets to see if there be another egg in the world." So she dispatched them, north and west and south and east. And in due time those little birds returned on weary wing, all save one, without tidings. "All have come back to me," said the Queen, "save Arabella alone. Dangers attend them in the world, birds of prey, men that slay little birds for their sport. Yet hope with me that she may come back at last." But the Lord Just spake and said, "O Queen Sophonisba, to hope and wait lieth not in my nature, but to be swift, resolute, and exact, whensoever I see my way before me. This have I ever approved, that the strawberry groweth underneath the nettle still. I will essay the ascent of Zora." Nor might all her prayers turn him from this rashness, wherein the Lord Brandok-Dahar besides did most eagerly second him. 2 nights and 2 days they were gone, and the Queen abode them in great trouble of heart in her pavilion by the enchanted lake. The 3rd evening came Brandok-Dahar back to the pavilion, bringing with him Jus, that was like a man at point of death, and himself besides deadly sick. "Tell me not anything," said the Queen. "Forgetfulness is the only sovereign remedy, which with all my art I will strive to induce in thy mind and in his. Surely I despaired ever to see you in life again, so rashly entered into those regions forbid." Brandok-Dahar smiled, but his look was ghastly. "Blame us not overmuch, dear Queen. Who shoots at the midday sun, though he be sure he shall never hit the mark, yet as sure he is, he shall shoot higher than who aims but at a bush." His voice broke in his throat. The whites of his eyes rolled up. He caught at the Queen's hand like a frightened child. Then, with a mighty effort mastering himself, "I pray bear with me a little," he said. "After a little good meats and drinks taken 'twill pass. I pray look to Jus. Is a dead, think you?" Days passed, and months, and the Lord Jus lay yet, as it were, in the article of death, tended by his friend, and by the Queen in that pavilion by the lake. At length, when winter was gone in Middle Earth, and the spring far spent, back came that last little martlet on weary wing, she they had long given up for lost. She sank in her mistress's bosom, almost dead indeed for weariness. But the Queen cherished her and gave her nectar, so that she gathered strength and said,
O Queen Sophonisba, fosterling of the gods, I flew for thee east and south and west and north, by sea and by land, in heat and frost, unto the frozen poles about and about, and at the last came to Demonland, to the range of Neverdale. There is a tarn among the mountains, that men call Dual Tarn. Very deep it is, and men that live by bread do hold it for bottomless. Yet hath it a bottom, and on the bottom lieth an hippogriff's egg, seen by me, for I flew at a great height above it. In Demonland, said the Queen. And she said to Lord Brandok Dahar, It is the only one. Ye must go home to fetch it. Brandok Dahar said, Home to Demonland? After we spent our powers and crossed the world to find the way? But when Lord Just knew of it, straightway with hope so renewed began his sickness to depart from him, so that he was in a few weeks' space very well recovered. And it was now a full year gone by, since first the demons came up into Costra Beloin. End of chapter 14.
Chapter 15 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E. R. Edisson. Chapter 15. Queen Presmira. How the Lady Presmira discovered to Lord Groh what she would have brought about for Demonland, in which should also appear her lord's yet more greatness and advancement, and how her too loud speaking of her purpose was the occasion whereby the Lord Corineus was to learn the sweetness of bliss deferred. On that same 26th night of May, when Lord Jus and Lord Brandok Dahar beheld from earth's loftiest pinnacle the land of Zimianvia and Costra Beloin, Groh walked with the Lady Presmira on the western terrace in Carcy. It wanted yet 2 hours of midnight. The air was warm, the sky a bower of moonbeam and starbeam. Now and then a faint breeze stirred, as if night turned in her sleep. The walls of the palace and the iron tower cut off the terrace from the direct moonlight, and flamboys spreading their wobbling light made alternating regions of brightness and gloom. Galloping strains of music and the noise of revelry came from within the palace. Groh spake. If thy question, O Queen, overlie a wish to have me gone, I am as lightning to obey thee, howsoe'er it grieve me. 'Twas an idle wonder only, she said. Stay, and it like thee. It is but a native part of wisdom, said he, to follow the light. When thou wast departed from the hall, methought all the bright lights were bedimmed. He looked at her sidelong as they passed into the radiance of a flamboy, studying her countenance that seemed clouded with grievous thought. Fair of all fairs she seemed, stately and splendid, crowned with a golden crown set about with dark amethysts. A figure of a crabfish topped it above the brow, curiously wrought in silver, and bearing in either claw a ball of chrysolite, the bigness of a thrush's egg. Lord Groh said, This too was part of my mind, to behold those stars in heaven that men call Berenice's hair, and know if they can outshine in glory thine hair, O Queen. They paced on in silence. Then, These phrases of forced gallantry, she said, sort ill with our friendship, my Lord Groh. If I be not angry, think it is because I father them on the deep health thou hast caroused unto our Lord the King on this night of nights, when the returning year bringeth back the date of his sending, and our vengeance upon Demonland. Madam, he said, I would but have thee give over this melancholy. Seemeth it to thee a little thing that the king hath pleased so singularly to honour Corrund thy husband, as give him a king's style and dignity, and all implant to hold in fee? All took notice of it how uncheerfully thou didst receive this royal crown, when the king gave it thee tonight, in honour of thy great lord, to wear in his stead till he come home to claim it. This, and the great praise spoke by the king of Corrund, which methinks should bring the warmth of pride to thy cheeks. Yet are all these things of as little avail against thy frozen, scornful melancholy, as the weak winter sun availeth against congealed pools in a black frost. Crowns are cheap trash to-day, said Presmira, whenas the king, with 20 kings to be his lackeys, raiseth up now his lackeys to be kings of the earth. Canst wonder if my joyance in this crown were dashed some little, when I looked on that other given by the king to Laxus? Madam, said Groh, thou must forgive Laxus in his own particular. Thou knowest he set not so much as a foot in Pixieland, and if now he must be called king thereof, that should rather please thee, being in despite of Corineus that carried war there, and by whatsoever means of skill or fortune overcame thy noble brother and drave him into exile. Corineus, she answered, tasteth in that mist that bane or ill hap which I dearly pray all they may groan under who would fatten by my brother's ruin. Then should Corineus's grief lift up thy joy, said Groh. Yet certain it is, fate is a blind puppy. Build not on her next turn. Am not I a queen? Said Presmira. Is not this witchland? Have we not strength to make curses strong, if fate be blind indeed? They halted at the head of a flight of steps leading down to the inner ward. The Lady Presmira leaned a while on the black marble balustrade, gazing seaward over the level marshes rough with moonlight. What care I for Laxus, she said at last. What care I for Corineus? A cast of hawks flown by the king against a quarry that in dear worthiness and nobility outshineth an hundred such as they. Nor I will not suffer mine indignation so to wit wanton with fair justice, as persuade me to put the white on witchland. It is most true the prince my brother practised with our enemies the downthrow of our fortunes, breaking open, had he but known it, the gate of destruction for himself and us, that night when our banquet was turned by him to a battle, and our winy mirths to bloody rages. She was silent for a time, then said, Oath-breakers. A most odious name, flat against all humanity, two faces in one hood. Oh, that earth would start up and strike the sins that tread on her. I see thou lookest west over sea, said Groa. There's somewhat thou canst see, then, my lord Groa, by owl light, said Presmira. Thou didst tell me at the time, he said, with what compliments in vows and strange well-studied promises of friendship the Lord Just took leave of thee at their escaping out of Carse. Yet art thou to blame, O Queen, if thou take in too ill part the breaking of such promises given in extremity, which prove commonly like fish, new, stale, and stinking in 3 days. Sure, 'tis a small matter, said she, that my brother should cast aside all ties of interest and alliance to save these great ones from an evil death, and they, being delivered, should toss him a light gramercy and go their ways, leaving him to be exterminated out of his own country, and for all they know or reck to lose his life. May the great devil of hell torture their souls. Madam, said Lord Groa, I would have thee view the matter soberly, and leave these bitter flashes. The demons did save thy brother once in Lida Nanguna, and his delivering of them out of the hand of our lord the king was but just payment therefore. The scales hang equal. She answered, Do not defile mine ears with their excuses. They have shamefully abused us, and the guilt of their black deed planteth them day by day more firmlier in my deeper settled hate. Art thou so deeply read in nature and her large philosophy, and I am yet to teach thee that deadliest hellebore or the vomit of a toad are qualified poison to the malice of a woman? The darkness of a great cloud bank spreading from the south swallowed up the moonlight. Presmira turned to resume her slow pacing down the terrace. The yellow fiery sparkles in her eyes glinted in the flamboy's flare. She looked dangerous as a lioness, and delicate and graceful like an antelope. Groa walked beside her, saying, Did not Coran drive them forth in winter onto the Maruna? And can they continue there in life, alone amid so many devouring perils? Oh, my lord, she cried, say these good tidings to the kitchen wenches, not to me. Why, thyself didst enter in past years the very heart of the Maruna, and yet camest off, else art thou the greatest liar. This only canker frets my soul, that days go by, and months, and witchland beateth down all peoples under him, and yet he suffereth the crown of pride, these rebels of demonland, to go yet untrodden under feet. Doth he deem it the better part to spare a foe and spoil a friend? That were an unhappy and unnatural conclusion. Or is he fair, even as was Garais the 11th? Heaven foreshield it, yet as ill an end may bechance him, and utter ruin come on all of us, if he will withhold his scourge from demonland until Juss and Brandok Dahar come home again to meet with him. Madam, said Lord Groa, in these few words thou hast given me the picture of mine own mind in small. And forgive me that I bespake thee warily at the first, for these are matters of heavy moment, and ere I opened my mind to thee I would know that it agreed with thine. Let the king smite now, in the happy absence of their greatest champions. So shall we be in strength against them if they return again, and perchance Goldry with them. She smiled, and it seemed as if all the sultry night freshened and sweetened at that lady's smile. Thou art a dear companion to me, she said. Thy melancholy is to me as some shady wood in summer, where I may dance if I will, and that is often, or be sad if I will, and that is in these days oftener than I would, and never thou crossest my mood, save but now thou did so, to plague me with thy precious flattering jargon, till I had thought thee skin changed with Laxus or young Corineus, seeking such lures as gallants spread their wings to stoop in ladies' bosoms. Or I would shake thee from this late-received sadness, said Groa. And he said, Thou art to commend me too, since I spake naught but truth. Oh, have done, my lord, she cried, or I'll dismiss thee hence. and as they walked Presmira sang softly, "He that cannot choose but love, and strives against it still, never shall my fancy move, for he loves 'gainst his will. Nor he which is all his own, and can at pleasure choose, when I am caught he can be gone, and when he list refuse. Nor he that loves none but fair, for such by all are sought, nor he that can for foul ones care, for his judgment then is naught. Nor he—" She broke off suddenly, saying, "Come, I have shook off the ill disposition the sight of Laxus bred in me, and of his tawdry crown. Let's think on action. And first I will tell thee a thing. This we spoke of hath been in my mind these 2 or 3 moons, ever since Corineus is campaigning in Pixieland. So when word came of my lord's destroying of the demon host, and his driving of Juss and Brandok de Har like runaway thralls on the Maruna, I sent him a letter by the hand of Viglas, that bare him from our lord the king's name in Impland. Therein I expressed how that crown of Demonland should be a braver crown for us than this of Impland, howsoe'er it sparkle, praying him urge upon the king his sending of an armament to Demonland, and my lord the leader thereof. Or, if he could not as then come home to ask it, then I entreated him make me his ambassador to lay this counsel before the king, and crave the enterprise for Corund." "Is not his answer in those letters I brought thee?" said Gro. "Ay," said she, "and a very scurvy, beggarly, lickspittle answer for a great lord to send to such a matter as I propounded. Alack, it puffs away all my wifely duty but to speak on't, and makes me rail like a gangrel woman." "I'll walk apart, madam," said Gro, "if thou wouldst have privateness to deliver thy mind." Presmira laughed. "'Tis not all so bad," she said, "and yet it makes me angry. The enterprise he commends, up to the hilt, and I have his leave to broach it to the king as his mouthpiece, and press it with him out of all ho. But for the leading on't, he will not have it, he. Corsus must have it, or Corineus. Stay, let me read it out." And standing near one of the lights, she took a parchment from her bosom. "Pooh, 'tis too fond. I will not shame my lord to read it, even to thee." "Well," said Gro, "were I the king, Corund should be my general to put down Demonland. Corsus he may send, for he hath done great work in his day, but in mine own judgment I like him not for such an errand. Corineus he hath not yet forgiven for his fault at the banquet a year ago." "Corineus," said Presmira. "So his butchery of mine own dear land goeth not only without reward, but hath not so much as brought him back to favour, thou thinkest?" "I think not," said Lord Gro. "Besides, he is mad wroth to have plucked that prickly fruit but for another's eating. He bears himself so presumptuous ill in the hall to-night, gleeking and gauling at Laxus, slapping of his sword, and with so many more shameless braves and wanton fashions, and worst of all his most openly seeking to toy with Sriva i' this first month of her betrothal unto Laxus. It will be a wonder if blood be not spilt betwixt them ere the night be done. Methinks he is not i' the mood to take the field again without some sure reward, and methinks the king, guessing his mind, would not offer him a new enterprise, and so give him the glory of refusing it." They stood near the arched gateway that opened on the terrace from the inner court. Music still sounded from the great banquet hall of Garais XI. Under the archway and in the shadows of the huge buttresses of the walls, it was as though the elements of gloom, expelled from the bright circles round the flamboys, huddled with sister glooms to make a double darkness. "Well, my lord," said Presmira, "doth thy wisdom bless my resolve?" "Whate'er it be, yes, because it is thine, O queen." "Whate'er it be," she cried, "dost hang in doubt on't? What else but seek audience with the king as my first care in the morning? Have I not my lord's bidding so far?" "And if thy zeal outrun his bidding in one particular?" said Gro. "Why, just," said she. "And if I bring thee not word ere tomorrow's noon that order is given for Demonland, and my lord Corund named for his general for that sailing, aye, and letters sealed for his straight recall from Orpish—" "Hist," said Gro. "Steps of the court." They turned towards the archway, Presmira singing under her breath, "Nor he that still his mistress pays, for she is thralled therefore, nor he that pays not, for he says, within she's worth no more. Is there then no kind of men, whom I may freely prove? I will vent that humour then in mine own self-love." Corineus met them in the gateway, coming from the banquet-house. He halted full in their path to peer closely through the darkness at Presmira, so that she felt the heat of his breath, heavy with wine. It was too dark to know faces, but he knew her by her stature and bearing. "Cry thee mercy, madam," he said. "Methought an instant 'twas—but no matter, your best of rest." So saying, he made way for her with a deep obeisance, jostling roughly against Gro with the same motion. Gro, little minded for a quarrel, gave him the wall, and followed Presmira into the inner court. The Lord Corineus sat him down on the nearest of the benches, leaned his stalwart back luxuriously upon the cushions, and there rested, thripping his fingers and singing to himself. What an ass is he, waits a woman's leisure, for a minute's pleasure, and perhaps may be, gulled at last and lose her, what an ass is he. What need I to care for a woman's favour? If another have her, why should I despair, when for golden labour I can have my share? If I chance to see one that's brown, I love her, till I see another, browner is than she, for I am a lover of my liberty. A rustle behind him on his left made him turn his head. A figure stole out of the deep shadows of the buttress nearest the archway. He leapt up and was first in the gate, blocking it with open arms. "Ah!" he cried. "So titmice roosted the shade, ha? What ransom shall I have of thee for making me keep empty tryst last night? Ay, and was creeping hence to make me a fool once more the night long, and I had not caught thee?" The lady laughed. "Last night my father kept me by him, and tonight, my lord, wouldst thou not have been fitly served for thy shameless ditty? Is that a sweet serenade for ladies' ears? Sing it again to thy liberty, and show thyself an ass." "Thou art very bold to provoke me, madam, with not even a star to be thy witness if I quite thee for't. These flamboys are old roisterers, grown grey in scenes of riot. They shall not blab." "Nay, if thou speakest in wine, I am gone, my lord." And as he took a step towards her, "And I return not, here or otherwise, but fling thee off for ever," she said. "I will not be entreated like a serving maid. I have borne too long with thy forced soldier fashions." Corineus caught his arms about her, lifting her against his broad chest so that her toes scarce kept footing on the ground. "O Sriva," he said thickly, bending his face to hers, "dost think to light so great a fire, and after walk through it and not be scorched thereat?" Her arms were close pinioned at her sides in that strong embrace. She seemed to swoon, as a lily swooning in the flaming noonday. Corineus bent down his face and kissed her fiercely, saying, "By all the sweets that ever darkness tasted, thou art mine tonight." "Tomorrow," she said, as if stifled. But Corineus said, "My dearest happiness, tonight." "My dear lord," said the Lady Sriva softly, "since thou hast made such a conquest of my love, be not a harsh and forward conqueror. I swear to thee by all the dreadful powers that clip the earth about, there's matter in it I should to my father this night. Nay, more, now, on the instant. 'Twas this only made me avoid thee but now. This, and no light conceit to vex thee." "He can attend our pleasure," said Corineus. "'Tis an old man, and oft sitteth late at his book." "How, and thou leftest him carousing?" said she. "There's that I must impart to him, ere the wine quite o'erflow his wits. Even this delay, how sweet soe'er to us, is dangerous." But Corineus said, "I will not let thee go." "Well," said she, "be a beast then. But know I'll cry on a rescue shall make all Carsi run to find us, and my brothers, aye, and Laxus, if he be a man, shall deal thee bitter payment for thy violence toward me. But if thou wilt be thy noble self, and respect my love with friendship, let me go. And if thou come secretly to my chamber door, an hour past midnight, I think thou'lt find no bolt to it." "Ha! Thou swearest it?" he said. She answered, "Else may steep destruction swallow me quick." "An hour past midnight, and until then 'tis a year in my desires," said he. "There spoke my noble lover," said Sriva, giving him her mouth once more. Swiftly she fared through the shadowy archway, and across the court, to where in the north gallery her father Corsus had his chamber. The Lord Corineus went back to his seat, and there reclined for a space in slothful ease, humming to an old tune. "My mistress is a shuttlecock, composed of cork and feather. Each battledore sets on her dock, and bumps her on the leather. But cast her off which way you will, she will recoil to another still. Fa la 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 la." He stretched his arms and yawned. "Well, Laxus, my chub-faced meacock, this medicine hath eased powerfully my discontent. 'Tis but fair, sith I must miss my crown, that I should have thy mistress. And to say true, seeing how base little and ordinary a kingdom is this of Pixieland, and what a delectable sweet wagtail this Sriva, whom besides I have these 2 years past ne'er looked on but my mouth watered, why, I may hold me part paid for the nonce, until I weary of her. Love is all my life, for it keeps me doing, yet my love and wooing is not for a wife. An hour past midnight, ha! What wine's best for lovers? I'll go drink a stoop, and so to dice with some of these lads to pass away the time till then." End of Chapter 15. Chapter 16 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 16. The Lady Sriva's Embassage. How the Duke Corsus thought it proper to commit an errand of state unto his daughter, and how she prospered therein. Sriva fared swiftly to her father's closet, and finding her lady mother sewing in her chair, nodding towards sleep, 2 candles at her left and right, she said, "My lady mother, there's a queen's crown waits the plucking. 'Twill drop into the foreign woman's lap, if thou and my father bestir you not. Where is he? Still in the banquet-house? Thou or I must fetch him on the instant." "Fie!" cried Zenambria. "How thou'st startled me! Fall somewhat into a slower speech, my girl. With such wild sudden talk I know not what thou meanest, nor what's the matter." But Sriva answered, "Matter of state. Thou goest not? Good, then I fetch him. Thou shalt hear all anon, mother," and so turned towards the door. Nor might all her mother's crying out upon the scandal of their so returning to the banquet, long past the hour of the women's withdrawal, turn her from this. So that the Lady Zenambria, seeing her so wilful, thought it less evil to go herself, and so went, and in a while returned with Corsus. Corsus sat in his great chair, over against his lady wife, while his daughter told her tale. "Twice and thrice," said she, "they passed me by, as near as I stand to thee, O my father, she leaning most familiarly on the arm of her curled philosopher. 'Twas plain they had never a thought that any was by to overhear them. She said so and so." And therewith Sriva told all that was spoke by the Lady Presmira, as to an expedition to Demonland, and as to her purposed speaking with the king, and as to her design that Coran should be his general for that sailing, and letters sealed on the morrow for his straight recall from Orpish. The Duke listened unmoved, breathing heavily, leaning heavily forward, his elbows on his knees, one great fat hand twisting and pushing back the sparse grey growth of his moustachios. His eyes shifted with sullen glance about the chamber, and his blabber cheeks, scarlet from the feast, flushed to a deeper hue. Zenambria said, "Alas, and did I not tell thee long ago, my lord, that Coran did ill to wed with a young wife? And thence cometh now that shame that was but to be looked for. It is pity indeed of so goodly a man, now past his prime age, she should so play at fast and loose with his honour, and he at the far end of the world. Indeed and indeed, I hope he will revenge it on her at his coming home. For sure I am, Coran is too high-minded to buy advancement at so shameful a price." "Thy talk, wife," said Corsus, "showeth long hair and a short wit. In brief, thou art a fool." He was silent for a space, then raised his gaze to Sriva, where she rested, her back to the massive table, half standing, half sitting, a dainty jewel-besparkled hand planted on the table's edge at her either side, her arms like delicate white pillars supporting that fair frame. Somewhat his dull eye brightened, resting on her. "Come hither," he said, "on my knee. So." When she was seated, "'Tis a brave gown," said he, "thou wearest to-night, my pretty pug. Red for a sanguine humour." His great arm gave her a back, and his hand, huge as a platter, lay like a buckler beneath her breast. "Thou smell'st passing sweet." "'Tis Malabathrum in the leaf," answered she. "I'm glad it likes thee, my lord," said Zenambria. "My woman still protesteth that such, being boiled with wine, yieldeth a perfume that passeth all other." Corsus still looked on Sriva. After a while he asked, "What madest thou on the terrace i' the dark, huh?" She looked down, saying, "It was Laxus prayed me meet him there." "Hum," said Corsus. "'Tis strange then he should await thee this hour gone by in the paved alley of the privy court." "He did mistake me," said Sriva, "and well is he served for such neglect." "So, and thou turnest politician to-night, my little puss-cat," said Corsus, "and thou smellest an expedition to Demonland? 'Tis like enow, for methinks the king will send Corineus." "Corineus?" said Sriva. "It is not thought so. 'Tis Coran must have it, if thou push not the matter to a decision with the king to-night, O my father, ere my Lady Fox be private with him to-morrow." "Bah," said Corsus, "thou art but a girl, and knowest naught. She hath not the full blood nor the resolution to carry it thus. No, 'tis not Coran stands i' the light, it is Corineus. It is, therefore, the king withheld him from Pixieland, which was his due, and tossed to the bauble to Laxus." "Why, 'tis a monstrous thing," said Zenambria, "if Corineus shall have Demonland, which surely much surpasseth this crown of Pixieland. Shall this novice have all the meat, and thou, because thou art old, have naught but the bones and the parings?" "Hold thy tongue, mistress," said Corsus. looking upon her as one looketh on a sour mixture. Why hadst not the wit to angle for him for thy daughter? Truly, husband, I am sorry for it, said Zenambria. The Lady Sriva laughed, placing her arm about her father's bullock neck and playing with his whiskers. Content thee, she said, my lady mother. I have my choice, and that is very certain, of these and of all other in Carse. And now I bethink me on the Lord Corineus, why, there's a proper man indeed. Weareth a shaven lip, too, which his experienced opinion shall tell thee, far exceedeth your nasty mustachios. Well, said Corsus, kissing her, howe'er it shape, I'll to the king tonight to move my matter with him. Meanwhile, madam, he said to Zenambria, I'll have thee take thy chamber straight, bolt well the door, and for more safety I will lock it myself at the outer side. There's much mirth toward tonight, and I'd not have these staggering drunken swads offend thee, as full well might befall, whiles I am on mine errand of state. Zenambria bade him good night, and would have taken her daughter with her, but Corsus said nay to this, saying, I'll see her safe bestowed. When they were alone, and the Lady Zenambria locked away in her chamber, Corsus took forth from an oaken cupboard a great silver flagon and 2 chased goblets. These he brimmed with a sparkling yellow wine from the flagon, and made Sriva drink with him, not once only, but twice, emptying each time her goblet. Then he drew up his chair, and sinking heavily into it, folded his arms upon the table and buried his head upon them. Sriva paced back and forth, impatient at her father's strange posture and silence. Surely the wine lighted riot in her veins. Surely in that silent room came back to her Corineus's kisses hot upon her mouth, the strength of his arms like bands of bronze holding her embraced. Midnight tolled. Her bones seemed to melt within her, as she bethought of her promise, due in an hour. Father, said she at last, midnight hath stricken. Wilt thou not go ere it be too late? The Duke raised his face and looked at her. He answered, No. No, he said again. Where's the profit? I wax old, my daughter, and must wither. The world is to the young, to Corineus, to Laxus, to thee, but most of all to Corund, who if a be old, yet hath his mess of sons, and mightiest of all his wife, to be his ladder to climb thrones withal. But thou saidst but now, said Sriva. Ay, when thy mammy was by. She cometh to her second childhood before her time, so as to a child I speak to her. Corund did ill to wed with a young wife, ha! Frut! Is not this the very bulwark and rampire of his fortune? Didst ever see a fellow so spurted up in a moment? My secretary, when I managed the old wars against the ghouls, and now climbed clean over me, that I'm yet 9 year his elder, called king, forsooth, and like to be ta'en soon, under the king, for dominus factotum throughout all the land, if I played this woman as I should. Will not the king, for such payment as she intends, give demon land upon imp land, and all the world beside? Hell's dignity that would I, an 'twere offered me. He stood up, reaching unsteadily for the wine-jug. Furtively he watched his daughter, shifting his gaze ever as her eye met his. Corund, said he, pouring out some wine, would split his sides for laughter to hear thy mother's prim-mouthed brabble. He that hath enjoined upon his wife, there's ne'er a doubt on't, this very errand, and if he visited on her at his coming home, 'twill but be with hotter love and gratitude for that she wins him in our despite. Trust me, 'tis not every lady of quality shall find favour with a king. The casement stood open, and while they stood without speech, sounds of a lute trembled upward from the court below, and a man's voice, soft and deep, singing this song. Homes to the bull, hoofs to the steed, to little hares, light feet for speed, and unto lions she giveth teeth, a-gaping dangerously. Fishes to swim, and birds to fly, and men to judge and reason why. She teacheth, yet for womankind none of these things hath she. For women beauty she hath made, their only shield, their only blade. O'er sword and fire they triumph still, so they but beauteous be. The Lady Sriva knew it was Laxus singing to her chamber window. Her blood beat wildly, the spirit of enterprise winging her imagination not toward him, nor yet Corineus, but into paths strangely and perilously inviting, undreamed of until now. The Duke her father came towards her, thrusting the chairs from his way, and saying, Corund and his mess of sons, Corund and his young queen, if he conjure with the white rose, why not thou and I with the red? It hath as fair a look, the devil damn me else, and savoureth as excellent sweet perfume. She stared at him big-eyed, with blushing cheeks. He took her hands in his. "Shall this outland woman," he said, "and her sallow-cheeked gallant still ruffle it over us? Long beards, whether they be white or black, are too huge a blemish in our eye, methinks. The thing seemeth not supportable, that this precise madam with her foreign fashions— Dost fear to stand in the field against her?" Sreva put her forehead on his shoulder, and said, scarce to be heard, "And it come to that, I'll show thee." "It must be now," said Corsus. "Presmira, thou hast told me, seeketh audience betimes i' the morning. Women are best at night time too." "If Laxus should hear thee," she said. He answered, "Tush, he need never blame thee, even if he knew on't, and we can manage that. Thy silly mother prated but now of honour. 'Tis but a school name, and if 'twere other, tell me whence springeth the fount of honour, if not from the King of Kings? If he receive thee, then art thou honoured, and all they that have to do with thee. I am yet to learn dishonour lieth on that man or woman whom the king doth honour." She laughed, turning from him toward the window, her hands still held in his. "For thou hast given me a strong potion, and I think that swayeth me more than thy many arguments, O my father, which to say truth I cannot well remember, because I did not much believe." Duke Corsus took her by the shoulders. His face overlooked her by a little, for she was not tall of build. "By the gods," he said, "'tis a stronger sweet scent of the red rose to make a great man drunk withal, than of the white, though that be a bigger flower." And he said, "Why not, for a game, for a madcap jest? A mantle and hood, a mask if thou wilt, and my ring to prove thee mine ambassador. I'll attend thee through the courtyard to the foot of the stairs." She said nothing, smiling at him, as she turned for him to put the great velvet mantle about her shoulders. "Ha!" said he, "'tis well seen a daughter is worth 10 sons." In the meanwhile Garais the king sate in his private chamber, writing at a parchment spread before him on the table of polished marmorite. A silver lamp burned at his left elbow. The window stood open to the night. The king had laid aside his crown, that sparkled darkly in the shadow below the lamp. He put down his pen and read again what he had writ, in manner following: "From me, Garais the 12th, great king of Witchland, and of Impland, and of Demonland, and of all kingdoms the sun doth spread his beams over, unto Corsus my servant. This is to signify to thee, that thou shalt, with all convenient speed, repair with a sufficient strength of men and ships to Demonland, because that untoward and traitorly cattle that do there inhabit are to feel by thee the sharpness of my correction. I will thee as holding the place of my general there, that thou enter forcibly into the said country, and do with all diligence spoil, ravish, and depopulate that land, enslaving, oppressing, and putting to the death, as thou shalt think most serviceable, all them that shall fall into thy power, and in particular putting down and ruinating all their strongholds or castles, as Galing, Drepaby, Crothring, Owlswick, and other. This enterprise in head is one of the greatest that ever was, since it is to tramp down Demonland, and once and for all to cut their combs, whose crests may danger us, and thou art to understand that without extraordinary experience of thy former merits, I would not commit to thee so great a charge, and especially in such a time. And since all great enterprises ought to be suddenly and resolutely prosecuted, therefore this ought to be done and executed at furthest in harvest next. Therefore it is my commandment that thou, Corsus, take order for the instant furnishing of ships, seamen, soldiers, horsemen, officiers, and particular persons, weapons, munitions, and all other necessaries, which is thought to be needful for the army and host which shall be levied for the said enterprise, for which this letter shall be thy sufficient warrant under my hand, given under my signeth of Ouroboros, in my palace of Carse, this 19th day of May, being the 7th day of my year the 2nd. The king took wax and a taper from the great gold inkstand, and sealed the warrant with the ruby head of the Worm Ouroboros, saying, "The ruby, most comfortable to the heart, brain, vigour, and memory of man. So 'tis confirmed." In that instant, when the wax was yet soft of the king's seal, sealing that commission for Corsus, one tapped gently at the chamber door. The king bade enter, and there came the captain of his bodyguard, and stood before the king, with word that one waited without, praying instant audience, and showed me for a token, O my lord the king, a bull's head with fiery nostrils, graven in a black opal in the bezel of a ring, which I knew for the signet of my lord Corsus, that his lordship beareth alway on his left thumb. And 'twas this, O king, that only persuaded me to deliver the message unto your majesty in this unseasonable hour, which if it be a fault in me, I do humbly hope your majesty will pardon. Knowest thou the man? Said the king. He answered, I might not know him, dread lord, for the mask and great hooded cloak he weareth. It is a little man, and speaketh a husky whisper. Admit him, said King Geraint. And when Sriva was come in, masked and hooded and holding forth the ring, he said, Thou lookest questionable, albeit this token opened a way for thee. Put off these trappings and let me know thee. But she, speaking still in a husky whisper, prayed that they might be private ere she disclosed herself. So the king bade leave them private. Dread lord, said the soldier, is it your will that I stand ready without the door? No, said the king. Void the antechamber, set the guard, and let none disturb me. And to Sriva he said, If thine errand prove not more honester than thy looks, this is an ill night's journey for thee. At the lifting of my finger I am able to metamorphose thee to a mandrake, if indeed thou beest aught else already. When they were alone, the Lady Sriva doffed her mask, and put back her hood, uncovering her head that was crowned with 2 heavy trammels of her dark brown hair, bound up and interwoven above her brow and ears, and pinned with silver pins, headed with garnets coloured like burning coals. The king beheld her from under the great shadow of his brows, darkly, not by so much as the moving of an eyelid or a lineament of his lean visage, betraying aught that passed in his mind at this disclosing. She trembled and said, O my lord the king, I hope you will indulge and pardon in me this trespass. Truly I marvel at mine own boldness how I durst come to you. With a gesture of his hand the king bade her be seated in a chair on his right beside the table. Thou needest not be afraid, madam, he said. Let I admit thee, let it make thee assured of welcome. Let me know thine errand. The fire of her father's wine shuddered down within her like a low-lit flame in a gust of wind, as she sat there alone with King Geraint the 12th in the circle of the lamplight. She took a deep breath to still her heart's fluttering, and said, O king, I was much afeard to come, and it was to ask you a boon. A little thing for you to give, lord, and yet to me that am the least of your handmaids a great thing to receive. But now I am come indeed, I durst not ask it. The glitter of his eyes, looking out from their eaves of darkness, dismayed her, and little comfort had she of the iron crown at his elbow, bright with gems and fierce with uplifted claws, or of the copper serpents interlaced that made the arms of his chair, or of the bright image of the lamp reflected in the tabletop, where were red streaks like streaks of blood, and black streaks like edges of swords streaking the green shining surface of the stone. Yet she took heart to say, Were I a great lord, had done your majesty service as my father hath, or these others you did honour tonight, O king, it had been otherwise. He said nothing, and still gathering courage, she said, I too would serve you, O king, and I came to ask you how. The king smiled. I am much beholden to thee, madam. Do as thou hast done, and thou shalt please me well. Feast and be merry, and charge not thine head with these midnight questionings, lest too much carefulness make thee grow lean. Grow I so, O king? You shall judge. So speaking, the Lady Sriva rose up and stood before him in the lamplight. Slowly she opened her arms upwards right and left, putting back her velvet cloak from her shoulders, until the dark cloak hanging in folds from either uplifted hand was like the wings of a bird lifted up for flight. Dazzling fair shone her bare shoulders and bare arms, and throat and bosom. One great hyacinth stone, hanging by a gold chain about her neck, rested above the hollow of her breasts. It flashed and slept with her breathing's alternate fall and swell. You did threaten me, lord, but now, she said, to transmute me to a mandrake. Would you might change me to a man? She could read nothing in the crag-like darkness of his countenance, the iron lip, the eyes that were like pulsing firelight out of hollow caves. I should serve you better so, lord, than my poor beauty may. Were I a man, I had come to you tonight and said, O king, let us not suffer any longer of that hound Juss. Give me your sword, O king, and I will put down Demonland for you and tread them under feet. She sank softly into her chair again, suffering her velvet cloak to fall over its back. The king ran his finger thoughtfully along the upstanding claws of the crown beside him on the table. Is this the boon thou askest me? He said at length. An expedition to Demonland? She answered it was. Must they sail tonight? Said the king, still watching her. She smiled foolishly. Only, he said, I would know what gadfly of urgency stung thee on to come so strangely and suddenly and after midnight. She paused a minute, then summoning courage, Lest another should first come to you, O king, she answered. Believe me, I know of preparations, and one that shall come to you in the morning praying this thing for another. What intelligence soever some hath, I am sure of that to be true that I have. Another? Said the king. Sriva answered, Lord, I'll say no names. But there be some, O king, be dangerous sweet suppliants, hanging their hopes belike on other strings than we may tune. She had bent her head above the polished table, looking curiously down into its depths. Her corsage and gown of scarlet silk brocade were like the chalice of a great flower, her white arms and shoulders like the petals of the flower above it. At length she looked up. Thou smilest, my lady Sriva, said the king. I smiled at mine own thought, she said. You'll laugh to hear it, O my lord the king, being so different from what we spoke on. But sure, of women's thoughts is no more surety nor rest than is in a vein that turneth at all winds. Let me hear it, said the king, bending forward, his lean hairy hand flung idly across the table's edge. Why, thus it was, lord, said she. There came me in mind of a sudden that saying of the lady Presmira, when first she was wed to Corund and dwelt here in Carcy. She said all the right part of her body was of Witchland, but the left Pixie. Whereupon our people that were by rejoiced much that she had given the right part of her body to Witchland. Whereupon she said, but her heart was on the left side. And where wearest thou thine? Asked the king. She durst not look at him, and so saw not the comic light go like summer lightning across his dark countenance as she spoke Presmira's name. His hand had dropped from the table edge. Sriva felt it touch her knee. She trembled like a full sail that suddenly for an instant the wind leaves. Very still she sat, saying in a low voice, There's a word, my lord the king, if you'd but speak it, should beam a light to show you mine answer. But he leaned closer, saying, Dost think I'll chaffer with thee? I'll know the answer first in the dark. Lord, she whispered, I would not have come to you in this deep and dead time of the night, but that I knew you noble, and the great king, and no amorous servitor that should deal false with me. Her body breathed spices, soft warm scents to make the senses reel, perfume of malabathrum bruised in wine, essences of sulphur-coloured lilies planted in Aphrodite's garden. The king drew her to him. She cast her arms about his neck, saying close to his ear, Lord, I may not sleep till you tell me they must sail, and Corsus must be their captain. The king held her gathered up like a child in his embrace. He kissed her on the mouth, a long, deep kiss. Then he sprang to his feet, set her down like a doll before him upon the table by the lamp, and so sat back in his own chair again, and sat regarding her with a strange and disturbing smile. On a sudden his brow darkened, and thrusting his face towards hers, his thick black square-cut beard jutting beneath the curl of his shaven upper lip, Girl, he said, who sent thee on this errand? He rolled his eye upon her with such a Gorgon look that her blood ran back with a great leap towards her heart, and she answered, scarce to be heard, Truly, O king, my father sent me. Was he drunk when he sent thee? Asked the king. Truly, lord, I think he was, said she. That cup that he was drunken withal, said King Garais, let him prize and cherish it all his life natural. For if in his sober senses he should make no more estimation of me than think to bribe my favours with a bona roba, by my soul, in his evil health he had sought to do it, for it should cost him nothing but his life. Sriva began to weep, saying, O king, your gentle pardon. But the king paced the room like a prowling lion. Did he fear I should supply Corund in his place? Said he. This was a cocksure way to make me do it, if indeed his practice had might to move me at all. Let him learn to come to me with his own mouth, if he hope to get good of me. Other else, out of Carcy let him go, and avoid my sight, that all the great masters of hell may conduct him thither. The king paused at length beside Sriva, that was perched still upon the table, showing a kind of sweetness in tears, sobbing very pitifully, her face hidden in her two hands. So for a time he beheld her, then lifted her down, and while he sat in his great chair, holding her on his knee with one hand, with the other drew hers gently from before her face. Come, he said, I blame it not on thee. Give over all thy weeping. Reach me that writing from the table. She turned in his arms and stretched a hand out for the parchment. Thou knowest my signet? Said the king. She nodded, aye. Read, said he, letting her go. She stood by the lamp and read. The king was behind her. He took her beneath the arms, bending to speak hot-breathed in her ear. Thou seest, I had already chose my general. Therefore I let thee know it, because I mean not to let thee go till morning, and I would not have thee think thy loveliness, howe'er it please me, moveth such deep commanding spells as to sway my policy." She lay back against his breast, limp and strengthless, while he kissed her neck and eyes and throat. Then her lips met his in a long, voluptuous kiss. Surely the king's hands upon her were like live coals. Bethinking her of Corineus, fuming at an open door and an empty chamber, the Lady Sreva was yet content. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of The Worm Ouroboros. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jason Mills. The Worm Ouroboros by E.R. Edisson. Chapter 17. The King flies his haggard. How the Lady Presmira came to the King on an errand of state, and how she prospered therein. Wherein is also seen why the King would send the Duke Corsus into Demonland, and how on the 15th day of July these lords, Corsus, Laxus, Gro, and Galandus, sailed with a fleet from Tenemos. On the morn came the Lady Presmira to pray audience of the King, and being admitted to his private chamber, stood before him in great beauty and splendour, saying, "Lord, I came to thank you, as occasion served not for me fitly so to do last night in the banquet hall. Sure it is no easy task, since when I thank you as I would, I must seem too unmindful of Coron's deserving, who hath won this kingdom. But if I speak too large of that, I shall seem to minish your bounty, O King, and ingratitude is a vice aboard." "Madam," said the King, "thou needest not to thank me, and to mine ears great deeds have their own trumpets." So now she told him of her letters received from Coron out of Impland. "It is well seen, Lord," said she, "how in these days you do beat down all peoples under you, and do set up new tributary kings to add to your great praise in Carsi. O King, how long must this ill weed of Demonland offend us, going still untrodden under feet?" The King answered her not a word. Only his lip showed a gleam of teeth, as of a tiger's troubled at his meal. But Presmira said, with great hardiness, "Lord, be not angry with me. Methinks it is the part of a faithful servant, honoured by his master, to seek new service. And where lieth likelier service Coron should do you than west overseas, to lead presently an army naval thither, and make an end of them, ere their greatness stand up again from the blow wherewith last May you did strike them?" "Madam," said the King, "this charge is mine. I'll tell thee when I need thy counsel, which is not now." And standing up as if to end the matter, he said, "I do intend some sport to-day. They tell me thou hast a falcon gentle, towereth so well she passeth the best Corineus hath. 'Tis clear calm weather. Wilt thou take her out to-day, and show us the mounty at a heron?" She answered, "Joyfully, O King. Yet I beseech you add this favour to all your former goodness, to hear me yet one word. Something persuades me you have already determined of this enterprise, and by your putting of me off, I do fear your majesty meaneth not Coron shall undertake it, but some other." Dark and immovable as his own dark fortress facing the bright morning, Gerais the King stood and beheld her. Sunshine streaming through the eastern casement lighted red-gold smouldering splendours in the heavy coils of that lady's hair, and flew back in dazzling showers from the diamonds fastened among those coils. After a space he said, "Suppose I am a gardener. I go not to the butterfly for counsel. Let her be glad that there be rose-trees there, and red stone-crops for her delight, which, if any be lacking, I'll give her more for the asking, as I'll give thee more masques and revels and all brave pleasures in Carsi. But war and policy is not for women." "You have forgot, O King," said the Lady Presmira, "Coron made me his ambassador." But seeing a blackness fall upon the King's countenance, she said in haste, "But not in all, O King. I will be open as day to you. The expedition he strongly urged, but not for himself the leading on't." The King looked evilly upon her. "I am glad to hear it," he said. Then, his brow clearing, "Know thou it for thy good, madam, order is ta'en for this already. Ere winter nights return again, Demonland shall be my footstool. Therefore write to thy lord, I gave him his wish beforehand." Presmira's eyes danced triumph. "Oh, the glad day!" she cried. "Mine also, O King?" "If thine be his," said the King. "Ah," said she, "you know mine outgallops it." "Then school thine, madam," said the King, "to run in harness. Why think'st thou I sent Coron into Impland, but that I knew he had excellent wit and noble courage to govern a great kingdom? Wouldst have me a wilful child snatch Impland from him like a sampler half-stitched? Then, taking leave of her with more gracious courtesy, "We shall look to see thee, then, madam, at the 3rd hour before noon," he said, and smote on a gong, summoning the captain of his guard. "Soldier," he said, "conduct the Queen of Impland, and bid the Duke Corsus straight attend me." The 3rd hour before noon the Lord Grow met with Presmira in the gate of the inner court. She had a riding habit of dark green tiffany, and a narrow ruff edged with Marjorie pearls. She said, "Thou comest with us, my lord? Surely I am beholden to thee. I know thou lovest not the sport, yet to save me from Corineus I must have thee. He plagueth me much this morning with strange courtesies, though why thus on a sudden I cannot tell." "In this," said Lord Grow, "as in greater matters, I am thy servant, O Queen. 'Tis yet time enough, though. This half hour the king will not be ready. I left him closeted with Corsus, but setteth presently about his arming against the demons. Thou hast heard?" "Am I deaf," said Presmira, "to a bell clangeth through all Carsi?" "Alas," said Grow, "that we waked too long last night, and lay too long abed i' the morning." Presmira answered, "That did not I, and yet I'm angry with myself now that I did not so." "How? Thou sawest the king before the council?" She bent her head for yes. "And he nay said thee?" "With infinite patience," said she, "but most irrevocably. My lord must hold by Impland till it be well brought to the saddle, and truly when I think on't, there's reason in that." Grow said, "Thou takest it, madam, with that clear brow of nobleness and reason I had looked for in thee." She laughed. "I have the main of my desire, if Demonland shall be put down. Natheless, it maketh a great wonder the king picketh for this work so rude a bludgeon, when so many goodly blades lie ready to his hand. Behold but his armoury." For, standing in the gateway at the head of the steep descent to the river, they beheld where the lords of Witchland were met beyond the bridge gate, to ride forth to the hawking. And Presmira said, "Is it not brave, my Lord Grow, to dwell in Carsi? Is it not passing brave to be in Carsi, that lordeth it over all the earth?" Now came they down, and by the bridge to the Way of Kings, to meet with them on the open mead on the left bank of Druima. Presmira said to Laxus, that rode on a black gelding full of silver hares, "I see thou hast thy goshawks forth to-day, my lord." "Ay, madam," said he, "there is not a stronger hawk than these. Withal they are very fierce and crabbed, and I must keep them private, lest they slay all other sort." Sriva, that was by, put forth a hand to stroke them. "Truly," she said, "I love them well, thy goshawks. They be stout and kingly." And she laughed and said, "Truly to-day I look not lower than on a king." "Thou mayst look on me, then," said Laxus, "albeit I bear not my crown i' the field." "'Tis therefore I'll mark thee not," said she. Laxus said to Presmira, "Wilt thou not praise my hawks, O Queen?" "I praise them," answered she, "circumspectly. For methinks they fit thy temper better than mine. These be good hawks, my lord, for flying at the bush. I am for the high mountee." Her stepson Hemming, black-browed and sullen-eyed, laughed in his throat, knowing she mocked and thought on Demonland. Meanwhile Corineus, mounted on a great white leard like silver, with black ear-tips, mane and tail and all 4 feet black as coal, drew up to the Lady Sriva and spoke with her apart, saying secretly, so that none but she might hear, "Next time thou shalt not carry it so, but I will have thee when and where I would. Thou mayst gull the devil with thy perfidiousness, but not me a second time, thou lying, cozening vixen." She answered softly, "Beastly man, I did perform the very article of mine oath, and left thee an open door last night. If thou didst look to find me within, that were beyond aught I promised, and know for that I'll seek a greater than thou, and a nicer to my liking, one less ready to swap each kitchen slut on the lips. I know thy practice, my lord, and thy conditions." His face flamed red. "Were that my custom, I'd now amend it. Thou art so true a runt of their same litter, they shall all be loathly to me as thou art loathly." "Mew," said she, "wittily spoke, i' faith, and right in the manner of a common horseboy, which indeed thou art." Corineus struck spurs into his horse, so that it bounded aloft, then cried out and said to Presmira, "Incomparable lady, I shall show thee my new horse, what rounds, what bounds, what stop he makes i' the full course of the gallop galliard." And therewith, trotting up to her, made his horse fetch a close turn in a flying manner upon 1 foot, and so away, rising to a racking pace, an amble, and thence, after some double turns, returning at the gallop and coming to a full stop by Presmira. "'Tis very pretty, my lord," said she, "yet I would not be thy horse." So, madam, he cried, thy reason? Why, said she, were I the most temperate, strongest, and of the gentlest nature i' the world, of the heat of the ginger, most swift to all high curvets and caprioles, I'd fear my crest should fall i' the end, tired with thy spur-galling. Whereat the Lady Sriva fell a-laughing. Now came Geraint the king among them, with his ostringers and falconers, and his huntsmen with setters and spaniels, and great fierce boar-hounds drawn in a string. He rode upon a black mare with eyes fire-red, so tall a tall man's head scarce topped her withers. He wore a leather gauntlet on his right hand. On the wrist thereof an eagle sat, hooded and motionless, gripping with her claws. He said, It is met. Coursers go not with us. I fly him at higher game. His sons attend him, losing not an hour in preparation for this journey. The rest take pleasure in the chase. So they praised the king, and rode forth with him east-away. The Lady Sriva whispered Corineus in the ear, Enchantery, my lord, ruleth in Courcy, and this it must be bringeth it about that none may see nor touch me twixt midnight hour and cock-crow, save he that must be king in Demon-land. But Corineus made as not to hear her, turning toward the Lady Presmira, that turned thence toward Grow. Sriva laughed. Merry of heart she seemed that day, eager as the small Merlin sitting on her fist, and willing at every turn to have speech with King Geraint. But the king heeded her not at all, and gave her not a look nor a word. So rode they a while, jesting and discoursing, toward the Pixieland border, rousing herons by the way, whereat none made better sport than Presmira's falcons, flown from her fist at many hundred paces as the quarry rose, and mounting with it to the clouds, in corkscrew flights, ring upon ring, up and up till the fowl was but a speck in the upper sky, and her falcons 2 lesser specks beside it. But when they were come to the higher ground, and the scrub and underwood, then the king whistled his eagle off his fist. She flew from him as if she would never have turned head again, yet presently upon his shout came in. Then, soaring aloft, waited on above his head, till the hounds started a wolf out of the brake. Thereon she swooped sudden as a thunderbolt, and the king lighted down and helped her with his hunting knife. And so again, thrice and 4 times, till 4 wolves were slain, and that was the greatest sport. The king made much of his eagle, giving her the last wolf's lights and liver to gorge herself withal. And he gave her over to his falconer, and said, Ride we now into the flats of Armony, for I will fly my haggard. My haggard eagle caught this march in the hills of Lagos. Many a good night's rest hath she cost me, to wake her and man her, and teach her to know my call, and be obedient. I will fly her now at the big black boar of Lagos, that afflicteth the farmers hereabouts these 2 years past, and bringeth them death and loss. So shall we see good sport, if she be not too coy and wild. So the king's falconer brought the haggard, and the king took her on his fist. A black eagle she was, red-beaked and glorious to look on. Her jesses were of red leather, with little silver varvels, whereon the crab of Witchland was engraved in small. Her hood was of red leather tasselled with silver. First she baited from the fist of the king, screaming and flapping her wings, but soon was quiet. And the king rode forth, sending his great brindled hounds before him to put up the boar, and all his company followed after. In no long time they roused the boar, that turned red-eyed and moody mad on the king's hounds, and charged among them, ripping up the foremost so that her bowels gushed out. The king unhooded his eagle, and flew her off his fist. But she, wild and ungentle, fastened not upon the boar, but on a hound that held him by the ear. She fixed her cruel claws in the hound's neck, and picked his eyes out, ere a man might speak 2 curses on her. Grow, that was by the king, muttered, Oh, I like not that. 'Tis ominous. By then was the king ridden up, and thrust the boar through with his spear, piercing him above and a little behind the shoulder, so that the blade went through the heart of him, and he sank down dying in his blood. Then the king smote his eagle in his wrath with the butt of his spear shaft, but smote her lightly and with a glancing blow, and away she flew and was lost to sight. And the king was angry, for all that the boar was slain, for the loss of his hound and his haggard, and for her ill behaviour. So he bade his huntsmen skin the boar, and bring home his skin to be a trophy, and so turned homeward. After a while the king called to him the Lord Grow to ride forward a little with him, and out of earshot of the rest. The king said to him, Thou hast a discontented look. Is it that I send not Corund into Demonland to crown the work he began at Eshgra Ogo? Thou babblest besides of omens. Grow answered, My lord the king, pardon my fears. For omens indeed, 'tis oft as the soul saith, As the fool thinketh, so the bell blinketh. I spake in haste. Who shall weep fate from her determined purpose? But since you did name Corund's name— I named him, said the king, because I am still ringing in the ears with women's talk, whereto also I doubt not thou art privy. Only so much, answered he, that this is my thought. He were our best, O king. Haply so, said the king. But wouldst have me therefore hold my stroke in the air, while occasion knocketh at the gate? I'll tell thee, I am potent in art magical, but scarce may I stay time's wing the while I fetch Corund out of Impland and pack him west away. Gro held his peace. Well, said the king, I will hear more from thee. Lord, he answered, I like not courses. The king gave him a frump to his face. Gro held his peace again a while, but seeing the king would have more, he said, Since it likes your majesty to demand my counsel, I will speak. You know, lord, of all your men in Carse, Corineus is least my friend, and if I back him you will be little apt to think me moved by interest. In my clear judgment, if Corund be barred from this journey, as reason is I freely embrace it, he must bide in Impland, both to harvest there his victories and to deny the road to Juss and Brandok-Dahar, if haply they return from the Maruna. And besides, time, as you most justly say, O king, calleth for speedy action. If he be barred, you have no better than Corineus, a complete soldier, a tried captain, young, fierce, and resolute, and one that sitteth not down again when once he standeth up, till that his will be accomplished. Send him to Demonland. No, said the king, I will not send Corineus. Hast thou not seen hawks that be in their prime, and full pride for beauty and goodness, but must be tamed ere they be flown at the quarry? Such an one is he, and I will tame him with harshness and duress till I be certain of him. Also I have sworn and told him, last year, when in his drunkenness he betrayed my counsel, and o'erset all our plans, broke me from Pixieland, and set my prisoners free, that Corund and Corsus and Laxus should be preferred and advanced before him, until by quiet service he shall purchase my goodwill again. Give then the glory to Corsus, but to Corineus the rude work on't for retiring. Send him as Corsus's secretary, and your work shall be better performed, O king. But the king said, No, thou art a fool to think he would receive it, that being in disgrace could not humble himself, but look bigger than before. And certainly I will not ask him, and so give him the glory to refuse it. My lord the king, said Gro, when I said unto you, I like not Corsus, you did scoff. Yet 'tis no simple niceness made me say it, but because I do fear he shall prove a false cloth. He will shrink in the wetting, and can abide no trial. By the blight of Sathanas, said the king, what crazy talk is this? Hast forgot the ghouls 12 years ago? True, thou wast not here, and yet what skills it, when the fame hath gone back and forth through all the world of their great spill, when Witchland stood in the greatest strait that ever she stood, and more than any other Corsus was to praise for our delivering. And since then, 5 years later, when he held Harquham against Goldry Blusco, and made him at last to give over the siege and go home most ingloriously, and else had all the Cibrian coast been the demon's appanage, not ours. Gro bowed his head, having naught to say. The king was silent a while, then bared his teeth. When I would burn mine enemy's house, he said, I choose me a good brand, full of pitch and rosin, apt to sputter well i' the fire and fry them. Such an one is Corsus, since he fared to Goblinland 10 years ago, on that ill-faring which, had I been king, I never had agreed to, when Brandok-Dahar took him prisoner on Lormeron field, and despitefully used him, stripped him stark naked, shaved him all of one side smooth as a tennis ball, and painted him yellow, and sent him home with mickle shame to Witchland. Hell devour me, but I think his heart is in this enterprise. I think thou'lt see brave doings in Demonland when he comes thither. Still Gro was silent, and the king said after a while, I have given thee reasons enow, I think, why I send Corsus into Demonland. There is yet this other, that by itself weigheth not one doit, yet with the others beareth down the balance, if more thou lookest for. Unto mine other servants great tasks have I given, and great rewards. To Corund, Impland, and a king's crown therefore. To Laxus the like in Pixieland. To thee, by anticipation, Goblinland, for so I do intend. But this old hunting dog of mine sitteth yet in's kennel, with ne'er a bone to busy his teeth withal. That is not well, and shall no longer be neither, since there's no reason for it. Lord, said Gro, in all argument and wise prevision you have quite o'erset me. Yet my heart misgives me. You would ride to Galing. You have ta'en an horse, therefore, with never a star in's forehead. Instead I see there is a cloud in's face, and such prove commonly furious, dogged, full of mischief and misfortune. They came down now upon the way of kings. Westward before them lay the marshes, with the great bulk of Carse 8 or 10 miles distant, their chiefest landmark, and the towers of Tenemos breaking the level horizon line beyond it. The king, after a long silence, looked down on Gro. His lean, rugged countenance was outlined darkly against the sky, terrible and proud. "Thou too," said he, "shalt be in this faring to Demonland. Laxus shall have sway afloat, since that is his element of water. Galandus shall be secretary to Corsus, and thou shalt be with them in their councils. But the main command, as I have decreed, lieth in Corsus. I'll not crop his authority, no, not by an hair's breadth. Sith Jus hath called the main, I will go hazard with Corsus. If I throw out with him, hell rot him for a false die. But 'tis not such a cast shall cast away all my fortune. I have a langret in my purse shall crossbite for me i' the end, and win me all, howsoe'er the demon's cog against me." So ended that day's sporting, and that day, and the next, and near a month thereafter, was the Duke Corsus busied up and down the land preparing his great armament. And on the 15th day of July was the fleet busked and bound in Tenemos roads, and that great army of 5,000 men-at-arms, with horses and all instruments of war, marched from their camp without Carse down to the sea. First of them went Laxus with his guard of mariners, he wearing the crown of Pixieland, and they loudly acclaiming him as king, and Geraes of Witchland as his overlord. A gallant man he seemed, ready-looking and hard, well armed, with open countenance and bright seaman's eyes, and brown, crisp, curly beard and hair. Next came the main foot army, heavy armed with axe and spear and the short Witchland hanger, yeomen and farmers from the lowlands about Carse, or from the southern vineyards, or the hill country against Pixieland. Burly, swashing fellows, rough as bears, hardy as wild oxen, agile as an ape. 4,000 fighting men, chose out by Corsus up and down the land as best for this great conquest. The sons of Corsus, Decalagius and Gorius, rode abreast before them with 20 pipers piping a battle song. Surely the tramp of that great army on the paven way was like the tramp of fate moving from the east. Geraes the king, sitting in state on the battlements above the water-gate, sniffed with his nostrils as a lion at the scent of blood. It was early morn, and the wind hung southerly, and the great banners, blue and green and purple and gold, each with an iron crab displayed above it, flaunted in the sun. Now came 4 or 5 companies of horse, 400 or more in all, with brazen armour and bucklers and glancing spears, and last of all Corsus himself, with his picked legion of 500 veterans to bring up the rear, fierce soldiers of the coastlands that followed him of old to the eastern main and Goblin land, and had stood beside him in the great days when he smote the ghouls in Witchland. On Corsus's left and right, a little behind him, rode Gro and Galandus. Ruddy of countenance was Galandus, gay of carriage and likely looking, long of limb, with long brown mustachios and large kind eyes like a dog. Presmira stood beside the king, and with her the ladies Zenambria and Sriva, watching the long column marching toward the sea. Hemming the son of Corund leaned on the battlements. Beside him stood Corineus, scornful-lipped, with folded arms, most glorious in holiday attire, a wreath of dwale about his brows, and wearing on his mighty breast the gold badge of the king's captain-general in Carse. Corsus, as he rode by beneath them, planted on the point of his sword his great helm of bronze, plumed with green-dyed estridge plumes, and raised it high above his head in homage to the king. The sparse grey locks of his hair lifted in the breeze, and pride flamed on the heavy face of him like a November sunset. He rode a dark bay, heavily built like a bear, that stepped ponderously as weighed down by his rider's bulk and the great weight of gear and battle harness. His veterans marching at his heel lifted their helms on spear and sword and bill, singing their old marching song in time to the clank of their mailed feet marching down the way of kings. When Corsus dwelt at Tenemos, beside the sea in Tenemos, tira lira lay, the ghouls came down to Tenemos, they brent his house in Tenemos, down derry down day. But Corsus carved the ghouls, the Corsus meat they e'er did eat, he made him garters with their bowels, when he came home to Tenemos, came home again to Tenemos, with a roundelay. The king held aloft his staff royal, returning Corsus's salute, and all Carse shouted from the walls. In such wise rode the Lord Corsus down to the ships with his great army that should bring bale and woe to Demonland. End of chapter 17.